She gave that man 3 years. 3 years and a ring she bought herself because he kept forgetting. She worked double shifts to keep the lights on while he figured out what he wanted to be. She smiled through every dinner where his mother called her overqualified, as if that were an insult, and drove home alone at midnight, and told herself it was fine. Some people do that. They give and give until nothing is left. It never helps. She did not know that yet. She was still learning. The morning Adeze walked out of his apartment for the last time, she took only what fit in one bag: her nursing credentials, her grandmother's photograph, one pot, because she had bought the rest of them anyway. She left the ring on the counter. She did not look back. What she did not know was that she had already begun something she could not have planned for. Something that would take 18 months to understand, and a single public morning to permanently, completely change. If you are new here, subscribe right now, because what happens next in this story is going to stay with you. Hit that bell so you never miss one, and drop a comment telling us where in the world you are watching from tonight. We read every single one. Now, back to Adeze. She was 29 years old. She had her registered nursing license, 17 months of emergency department experience, $240 in savings. That was the full inventory, not nothing. She had seen nurses come in with less. She took a room in a shared house close enough to the hospital to walk in bad weather. She reported for the night shift the following Monday, as if the previous week had not happened at all. The emergency department at night is a particular kind of place. It runs on caffeine and controlled chaos. It runs on the specific competence of people who make decisions before the information is complete. Adeze was good at it. She had known since her 3rd month, when a senior doctor watched her manage a respiratory arrest with 2 nurses out sick, and said nothing. That was how he gave compliments. She knew the supply cabinet better than the supervisor. She knew which families needed extra time and which needed a firm voice. She could tell the difference in under a minute. She was not flashy about any of it. She just did the work. She went home. She slept. She came back and did it again. 3 weeks after she moved into the shared house, on a Tuesday in February when the temperature had been below freezing for 6 days straight, they brought in a man who was bleeding from his side and unconscious. He was surrounded by 4 other men who did not explain themselves. They came through the door like they owned it. They positioned themselves at the edges of the room the way people do when they are accustomed to being the most dangerous thing in any space they enter. The triage nurse called it a possible stabbing. The attending on duty was a doctor named Yamazaki, 11 years at the hospital, good at reading rooms. He took one look at the men in the waiting area and discovered he had an urgent matter on the 3rd floor. He said this out loud. He gathered his tablet and his coffee, and he left. Adeze watched him go. She turned back to the patient on the gurney. His name was Kato. She did not know that yet. She did not know much except that he was losing blood fast and she needed to move. When his jacket was cut away, she saw something dark at his collarbone. When his shirt followed, she saw all of it. Full chest and shoulders. A hawk in flight across the left side, done in black and red so fine it looked like a woodblock print. It covered everything from his shoulder blades forward. She had never seen work like that outside a museum. She noted it. She kept working. Hours later, when the bleeding was controlled and the attending had quietly reappeared, and the men in suits had arranged themselves along the corridor wall outside, Adeze sat at the nursing station and wrote her notes. She did not think about the tattoo, or the men, or what any of it meant. She thought about whether the morning shift had enough O negative in the fridge. They usually did not. She made a note to check. One of the suited men approached the station. He was older than the others, a face that had been through several things and come out the other side, not exactly unscathed, but composed. He bowed to her, not the small professional nod she got from administrators. A real bow, deep and held. "You stayed," he said. She looked up. Of course. He looked at her. The doctor did not stay. The doctor had somewhere to be, she said. "I had a patient." He bowed again. He returned to the corridor without another word. That was the first night. What she did not know, what she could not have known, was that in the 4 weeks she had treated this man. Word had moved through the men in that corridor like water through a channel. She had not asked their names. She had not asked what organization they were with. She had treated the patient in front of her and done her job and gone home. In doing that, in that specific ordinary way, she had become someone they noticed. The composed older man had already told someone senior that the nurse stayed. He had said it like it mattered. Because it did. Some things cannot be bought. They can only be earned by doing what you do when you think no one is watching. She had done that. She had not even been trying. The second visit came 3 weeks later. Different injury. Same 4 men. Different hour. She was the only nurse on shift who did not look pointedly at the ceiling when the name came through triage. By the 5th visit, she knew his name was Rio Kato. 41 years old. No next of kin listed on any form. He spoke in short sentences and did not complain. He drank his tea without milk or sugar. He thanked whoever brought it to him with the same brief precision he used for everything else. She filed all of it away. The way you do with people who take up a certain kind of space without trying to, without asking you to notice. You notice anyway. He woke on the 5th visit while she was checking his IV line. She had been at it for 40 seconds before she realized his eyes were open. "You should be asleep," she said. "I don't sleep well in hospitals." "No one does." He looked at the ceiling. "How long?" "Another day. Maybe 2, depending on the inflammation." A pause. "You were here last time." "I'm here most nights," she said. "Night shift. You were the one who," he stopped, "controlled the bleeding." "Yes." He looked at her then, not the flat evaluating look she sometimes got from men in that room, sizing her up for something. This was different. He was trying to place something. A memory. Whatever he found in it, he exhaled very slowly. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome," she said. Sleep, he did. She was 7 weeks along before she believed the test. She took it 3 times over 2 days. She was 8 weeks before she told her housemate Precious, who hugged her for a long time without saying anything, which was exactly right. Precious knew that sometimes what you need is not words. You need someone to hold the weight with you for a few minutes before you figure out what to do about it. She was 9 weeks before she understood she needed to tell the one person who had to know, which meant making contact she had not planned for. She did not have his number. She had the number of the older man, the composed one, because he had given her a card on the 3rd visit and said to call if there were issues with discharge paperwork. She stared at the card for 2 days. Then she called. She told him she needed to speak to Mr. Kato about something unrelated to his treatment. There was a silence long enough to make her wonder if she had made a mistake. Then the man said he would pass on the message. He did not ask her to explain. She was glad. Kato called at 6 the next morning. She was already awake. She had not slept past 5 in 3 weeks. "Ishida says you need to speak with me." "Yes, is this about my treatment?" No. A pause. Tell me. She told him. She was direct about it because she did not know how else to be. The date, the test result, the calculation, the number of weeks. She did not editorialize. She did not tell him what she needed from him because she did not yet know. She gave him the information and waited. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Are you well?" She blinked. It was not the question she had expected. "I'm fine. The pregnancy is normal so far." "Good." A pause. "I'll come to the hospital tomorrow evening if you're working." "I'm working," she said. "Then I will come." He came. He sat across from her in the small break room with his coat still on and his hands flat on the table. He listened to everything she had said on the phone and a few things she had not. She told him she was not asking for anything she had not earned. She told him she could manage. He listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "I want to be involved." She looked at him. "I understand if that is not what you want," he said, "but I want to say it clearly. I want to be involved." What she did not understand then was how much that sentence had cost him. Not the words, the willingness behind them. He had spent 41 years in a structure that defined belonging by obligation, by debt, by blood. Choosing, for him, was not a small act. Every decision he had ever made of any weight had been like this, deliberate, complete, with full understanding of what it cost. She did not know that yet. She just looked at him and decided to believe him. She was tired of deciding not to believe people. It had never worked. "Okay," she said. She was 12 weeks along when she ran into David. She had not planned for it. Tokyo is a large city. She had moved to a different ward. She took new routes. She did most of the things people do when they want to reduce the chance of a collision with someone they are relieved to be done with. And then, on a Saturday morning in March, at a supermarket she had started using because it carried the specific ginger biscuits her stomach had decided were mandatory, she turned a corner, and there he was. David Okafor, her ex, 31 years old, wearing a jacket she had bought him, looking exactly the way people look when they have not spent the last 3 months rearranging their lives. He saw her. She watched his face go through recognition, then assessment, then something she could not immediately name. A daisy. He said it like confirming a suspicion. "David." He looked at her. Her coat was open. She was 12 weeks along and not yet visibly showing. She had gained weight in the way that the first trimester gives you. She had not thought about it because she had been occupied with things that mattered more. "You got fat," he said. She stared at him. He laughed. Not a kind laugh. The kind dressed up as a joke that is not. Just, "You've put on weight. Stress eating? I heard the breakup hit you pretty hard." He had heard. From someone. She filed that away. "I'm fine," she said. "Good, good." He was still smiling. "You look tired too." "Night shifts?" "David, what?" "I'm going to get my groceries now," she said. He stepped slightly to the side. Mock gallant. Gestured at the aisle. "Of course," he said. "Nice seeing you, Ada. Take care of yourself." A pause. "Maybe eat a salad." She walked past him. She got her ginger biscuits, her prenatal vitamins, the specific tea Kato had mentioned liking, which she had started buying without examining why. She paid. She left. She was 3 blocks away before she fully understood what David had not known when he said it. She was 12 weeks pregnant with Rio Kato's child. David had looked at her and seen weight. He had not seen any of the rest of it. He had absolutely no idea. She thought about that all the way home. The gap between what you see and what is actually there. Between what you assume and what is true. The more she thought about it, the less it hurt. It was not about her anymore. It was about him and what he was and was not capable of seeing. You cannot show people things they have decided not to look for. She had learned that. She filed it away. She did not tell Kato about it that evening when he called to check in, as he had started doing every few days. She did not mention it for another 3 weeks. When she finally did, almost by accident, his response was so specific and so quiet that she had to ask him to repeat it. "Say that again?" "I said, he will not speak to you that way again," Kato said. "You don't need to do anything. I am not going to do anything," he said. "I am stating what will happen." Some things correct themselves. She did not ask what that meant. She went to sleep. By the time she was 5 months along, she and Kato had developed something that did not yet have a name, but functioned like a partnership. He called every 2 or 3 days. He accompanied her to the 20-week scan and sat in the chair beside the examination table with his coat on and his hands on his knees. He looked at the screen with an expression she had not seen on him before. Focused, still like a man, watching something he had not known he was waiting for. "Everything is normal?" he said to the technician. "Everything looks excellent," the technician said. He nodded once. He said nothing else. In the elevator on the way out, very quietly, "Thank you for telling me." She looked at him. "You're welcome." The older man, Ishida, she now knew his name, was waiting by the car. He opened the door for her every time. She had stopped protesting. The thing about Rio Kato was that he was different from who she had expected. She had expected a harder version of hardness. The men she had treated at the hospital were usually either performing toughness or moving through genuine pain in silence. Kato did the latter. But it was not coldness. It was economy. He did not use more words than he needed, and the words he used were precise. Precision, in her experience, was a form of care. He asked how she was sleeping. He remembered that she did not like the smell of cigarette smoke and never smoked near her. When she mentioned offhand that the hospital elevator had been out of service for 3 days and she was walking 6 flights of stairs in her work clogs, he said nothing. 2 days later, the elevator was repaired. She did not ask. She was not falling in love with him. She was doing something more complicated and more careful than that. Deciding, one piece of evidence at a time, whether this was a person she could trust. That process took time. She had not given it enough time before. She was not making that mistake again. There were evenings when he came to her apartment and they sat in the same room and talked about practical things, the care arrangement for after the birth, what the hospital paperwork required, what her maternity leave looked like. There were other evenings when they sat and did not talk at all, and she found that she did not mind the silence. She had lived with people who filled every silence with noise because they were afraid of what it might contain. Kato was not afraid of silence. He lived in it comfortably, the way someone lives in a house they have been in long enough to know where every door opens. She found that she fit in it alongside him. That was the most surprising thing about all of it. Not the dramatic parts, but this, how ordinary it felt to be in a room with him and not need to fill it. Kato came to the hospital one more time before the baby came, not as a patient. He appeared at the end of her shift on a Thursday evening, unannounced, and waited in the lobby with Ishida and one other man. He was wearing a dark coat. He looked entirely out of place in a hospital lobby. He did not seem to notice. "You don't have to wait for me," she said. "I wanted to," he said. They walked out together. The November air was cold. He walked beside her at a careful distance she had started to recognize as his version of attentiveness, close enough to catch her if she needed it, far enough not to crowd. She had told him once that hovering exhausted her. He had adjusted instantly, without comment, and never hovered again. That was another thing she had noted. He did not argue about how he was allowed to care for you. He just changed. "There is something I should tell you," he said, as they waited at a crossing. She looked at him. "My life is not simple," he said. "You know some of what it involves. There are things you do not know yet. I want to be honest about what I am." The light changed. They crossed. She waited. "The organization I lead," he said, "how it functions, the history of it. There are people who are afraid of me, and people who owe me things, and people who would prefer I did not exist. I have made decisions I would not unmake. I have protected people I care about using methods that were not clean." He paused. "You deserve to know that before you decide anything." She thought about it. They walked half a block before she spoke. "I've worked in an emergency department for almost 2 years," she said. "I know what it looks like when someone has been beaten versus when they've been in a car accident. I know what a professional injury looks like. I figured out what you were on the 3rd visit." He stopped, looked at her. "I'm not naive," she said. "I'm a nurse. We see a lot." She kept walking. "I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I'm saying I already knew." He stood there for a moment. Then he followed. "What does it change?" he said. She thought about it seriously. "I don't know yet," she said. "I'll tell you when I do." He accepted this. He walked her to her door. He bowed once, correct depth, and waited until she was inside. She told him 6 weeks later. Late at night. A phone call. 34 weeks along and unable to sleep. He picked up on the first ring, as he always did. "I've decided," she said. "Tell me. I want this to work," she said. "All of it. I don't know what that looks like yet. I think you don't either. But I'm willing to figure it out. With you." A silence. "You're certain?" "Yes," she said. Another silence. Longer. When he spoke, something underneath his usual economy had shifted. Not soft exactly. That was not a register he moved through easily. But something that had been held for a long time, finally put down. "I have been waiting," he said, "to hear you say that. How long?" "Since you told the doctor on the 3rd floor he had somewhere to be," he said. And turned back to the patient. She laughed. She had not expected to laugh, and it surprised her. He was quiet in a way that sounded like he was absorbing the sound of it, storing it somewhere. She found this both absurd and entirely true. "Get some sleep," he said. "You too," she said. She slept better that night than she had in 4 months. The baby came at 38 weeks. Fast and uncomplicated, in the same hospital where she worked. 3 of the nurses attending her were colleagues who had seen her manage considerably worse situations. They regarded her with the specific warmth of people who are now officially rooting for you. Kato was there. He had arrived before her, which required some explaining since she had not called him until she was already in the car. When she walked into the delivery ward, he was standing in the corridor with his coat on and his hands clasped in front of him. That expression again. Focused, still something waiting. She said, "I'm fine." His shoulders dropped. That was the most visible relief she had ever seen him express. 2 words, and his whole body believed them. He waited outside during the delivery because she asked him to. He agreed without argument, which she had by now learned to expect from him, and still appreciated every time. He came in when she called. He stood at the edge of the room. He looked at the child, and then at her, and then at the child again. "A girl," she said. He moved toward the bed slowly. He looked at his daughter for a long time. When he reached out and touched her hand, one finger, careful and complete, Adeze watched his face and thought, "There it is." That is exactly what it looks like. What do you want to name her? He said. I was thinking Amara, she said. It means grace in Igbo. He said it quietly, testing the shape of it. Then he looked at Adesi, and something passed between them that was not yet everything, but was already the beginning of everything, and he said, yes. That is right. The months that followed were not simple. She had known they would not be. She returned to work at 14 weeks. He arranged care for Amara that was comprehensive to the point of slight excess. She had a conversation with him about proportionality that he received without argument and then largely ignored in the particulars. She decided to tolerate this because Amara was thriving and she had learned to pick her battles. They lived separately. She had moved to a larger apartment. He visited every few days. Some evenings they talked. Some evenings they did not, and she found that she did not mind. He was good at silence. She had not previously known that was something she needed in a person. He met Precious, who assessed him with a look that could have stripped paint. After 40 minutes, she pulled Adesi into the kitchen and said, "He's not what I expected." Adesi said, "What did you expect?" Precious said, "I don't know. Less, he looks at you like he is trying to memorize you." Adesi did not say anything to that. She got the tea. He met her mother on a video call, which was Adesi's idea because she wanted to manage the setting. The call lasted 45 minutes and ended with her mother saying, in Igbo, that he had very good manners, which in her mother's vocabulary was the highest available praise. Adesi translated this for Kato afterward. He received it with a gravity that was almost comical, except that he was entirely serious, which made it not comical at all, just true. It was a life being built. She had not expected it to feel this ordinary. She had expected drama, or the constant low-level work of existing in someone else's world. Some of that was there. But mostly it was just days, her shifts, his calls, Amara's changing face, the slow accumulation of shared routines. She thought sometimes about who she had been when she walked out of David's apartment with one bag. She was not that person anymore. She was not sure when the change had happened. It had not been a single moment. It had been a lot of small choices, one after another, each small enough to doubt, and enough of them together to matter entirely. The formal occasion came in April, when Amara was 8 months old. Kato had, over the previous year, been managing a legal matter involving the organization. It had reached the point of formal resolution. This meant a meeting at a law office in the center of the city, lawyers and principals. Several people whose involvement in various enterprises was being officially and publicly documented for the first time. She was not meant to attend. It was not her world. But Ishida called her the day before, and he had never called her before, and said in his measured way that Mr. Kato had asked whether she might come. Not for any practical reason, because he wanted her there. She arranged the care. She wore the charcoal dress she had bought when she made charge nurse, which still fit, and which she reached for every time she needed to feel capable. She met Ishida outside the building at 9 in the morning. He bowed. She bowed back, as she had learned to do. They went upstairs. The room was large and formal. A long table, chairs on both sides, windows that looked out over the city. 8 people already seated when she arrived. Kato was at the far end. He stood when she came in. Several people paused. He had not stood for anyone else. She sat in the chair Ishida indicated, near the head of the table. And then she looked at the far side of the room, and she saw David. She processed this over about 2 seconds. David Okafor. In this room. in a suit that did not fit him quite right, seated 3 chairs down on the far side of the table, looking at documents in front of him with the focus of a man who has not yet noticed the person who has noticed him. She understood now, looking at the room and how its pieces fit together, that the company David worked for was connected to the interests being discussed today. He was here as a representative of something. He looked up. He saw her. She watched him do the math. This room, that man at the head of the table, the 8 months since February, her, here, in this chair. He looked back at his documents. His jaw had done something small. A compression. The kind a body makes when the information it has just received is significantly different from what it expected. "You got fat," he had said. "Maybe eat a salad." He had said both of those things to the woman now seated at this table. He had said them while being completely, entirely unaware of what was actually happening in her life. The meeting began. She was not a participant. She listened. She was good at listening. She was good at reading rooms, at knowing when to speak and when to be still. She had done it for years in emergency departments, where the wrong word at the wrong moment cost time you did not have. She sat and was still, and she watched. 40 minutes in, one of the lawyers raised a dispute about a property arrangement. Kato said very quietly that his position had been clearly documented and he was not open to renegotiation. Then he looked down the table at her, briefly, then back at the lawyer. The lawyer stopped mid-sentence. He agreed. The room understood something from that sequence. She watched it move through the people seated around the table. The recalibration. This woman, who is she? What she is to him, what that means here, in this room, at this table, with these people present. David was doing his own version of it 3 chairs down. She could see him without looking at him directly, which was a skill the emergency department had given her. His pen was very still. At the 90-minute mark, a break was called. Ishida appeared beside her and offered tea. She accepted. People moved and gathered into small clusters. David crossed the room toward her. She had half expected it. "A daisy," he said. "David, he was doing something with his face that was supposed to look casual. I didn't know you'd be here." "I'm here," she said. "Right," a glance at the head of the table. "So, you and—" "Yes," she said. Another recalibration. "The weight you gained last year. Amara is 8 months old," she said. "She is doing very well." She watched that land. David did not have a prepared response for that sentence in this room, in this context. She could see the exact moment he understood what the previous 8 months had contained. What he had not known when he stood in a supermarket and told her to eat a salad. What had been invisible to him because he had not thought to look. He had looked at her and seen only what he expected. Nothing more. "I see," he said. "Good," she said. She turned back to Ishida, accepted the cup of tea, and looked out the window at the city, which was gray and bright in the way of April mornings. She did not look at David again. Across the room, Kato had finished his conversation with the lawyer. He looked over. She met his eyes. He held the look for a moment. In it was a question. "Are you all right?" She answered it the way he answered most things, briefly and completely. She held his gaze until he understood. Then she looked back at the city and drank her tea. The meeting reconvened. By the time it ended, the terms were settled and documented. People gathered their things. David left with his group, not quickly enough to look like he was leaving quickly, but quickly enough that she noticed. Kato came to her as the room emptied. Ishida and the other man had positioned themselves near the door in the particular way they had when they were making themselves visible as a courtesy. "Thank you for coming," he said. "You asked," she said. I came. He looked at her. He spoke to you. Briefly, and? She thought about February, the supermarket, the jacket she had bought David. You got fat. A joke that was not a joke, from a man who had looked at her and seen only what he expected. Who had not seen, could not have imagined what was actually happening in her life, the man at the other end of that table. The small person who had changed both their lives. The 8 months of ordinary days that had added up to something David, standing in a supermarket in February, would not have been able to conceive of. He has a clearer picture now, she said. That is enough. Kato looked at her with the expression he had when he had been about to say something and decided, upon reflection, that she had already said it better. Yes, he said. That is enough. Ishida opened the door. They walked out together through the marble lobby and into the April morning. The city was exactly as loud and ordinary as it always was. She breathed in the cold air. She thought, there it is. That is what a complete thing feels like. She had not known before. Now she did. There is something you should understand about what those months between the 5th hospital visit and the phone call actually looked like from the inside. You might assume she was waiting. She was not waiting. She was working. She was building. She was going home at the end of 12-hour shifts and eating whatever she had the energy to make, and sleeping, and waking up, and doing it again. She was managing her own feelings the way nurses manage a chaotic bay, by triaging them. This one goes first. This one can wait. This one will need attention eventually. She had gotten very good at that. Maybe too good, for a while. But it had kept her functional when she needed to be functional. And now she was learning, slowly, that you could let some things through without the whole system collapsing. She was learning that from him, without him knowing he was teaching it. There were evenings when he came to her apartment, and they sat in the same room and talked about practical things. The care arrangement for after the birth, what the hospital paperwork required, what her maternity leave looked like. There were other evenings when they sat and did not talk at all, and she found that she did not mind. She had lived with people who filled every silence with noise because they were afraid of what it might contain. David had been like that. If there was a quiet in the room, he would find something to say about it, something to perform into it, until the silence was gone and you were both listening to the performance instead of to each other. Kato was not afraid of silence. He lived in it comfortably, the way someone lives in a house they have been in long enough to know where every door opens. She found that she fit in it alongside him. That was the most surprising thing about all of it. Not the dramatic parts, but this. How ordinary it felt to be in a room with him and not need to fill it. That is the thing they do not tell you about trust. They talk about it like it arrives in a moment. A declaration, a grand gesture, and sometimes it does. But most of the time, if you are paying attention, you notice it accumulating in the small things. The way someone adjusts without being asked to adjust. The way someone tells you the truth when the truth is inconvenient for them. The way someone picks up the phone on the first ring. You may think you are looking for something large and certain. What you are actually building is something made of small, ordinary moments. And by the time you look up and name it, it has been there for months already. She named it on a Thursday in January, to herself, in the car on the way home from the hospital. Not to him, not yet, just to herself. The naming was quiet and private, and felt less like a discovery and more like finally looking at something that had been there the whole time. Weeks went by. The shape of things between them continued to develop without either of them pushing it, which was itself a kind of signal. Things that are being pushed feel pushed. Things that are growing on their own feel different. They feel like they belong to the ground they are growing in. Ishida, for his part, observed all of this with the careful attention of a man who had spent decades reading situations before they fully revealed themselves. He said nothing about it to anyone. But on the evenings when he drove her home and she got out of the car and went upstairs, he sat for a moment. After the door closed, he allowed himself to think that perhaps Kato had finally found something worth staying for. Not a rival. Not a problem. Not a debt to be paid or a strategy to be executed. Something else. Something the man had not had before. Ishida had known Kato for 22 years. He had seen a great many things in that time. He had not seen this before. He was, in the specific private way of men who have no permission to show it, glad. The pregnancy moved through its stages the way pregnancies do, not dramatically, but steadily, and with a series of small revelations that she found she did not mind having. She minded the nausea. She minded walking 6 flights of stairs in her work clogs. She did not mind the way the world seemed to slow down slightly around her. She found herself noticing things she had not noticed before. The light at 6 in the morning. The sound of the building settling at night. The way Kato said her name, which he had started doing in the last few weeks. Not a Daisy, her full name, but something just slightly shorter, slightly softer. Still correct, still precise, still entirely him. She did not tell him she had noticed. She noticed it for herself. Precious noticed things too. Precious had a talent for it, for seeing the shape of something before you had decided what it was. She watched a Daisy on the phone one evening when Kato called, and afterward she said, "You sound different when it's him." A Daisy said, "Different how?" Precious said, settled, "Like you have somewhere to put your feet." A Daisy thought about that for a long time. She decided it was accurate. She had not had somewhere to put her feet in a very long time. She had not realized how much she had been holding herself off the ground until she was no longer doing it. Her mother called every Sunday. Her mother did not know about the pregnancy until Adeze was 16 weeks. Because Adeze was not ready to have that conversation until she was ready, and she did not rush herself. When she told her, her mother was quiet for a moment, which with her mother meant she was organizing her thoughts rather than reacting to them. Then she said, "Are you well?" which was the same first question Kato had asked. Adeze thought that said something, though she was not sure what. Then her mother said, "Tell me about him." And Adeze did. She talked for 40 minutes. Her mother listened without interrupting, which was also what Kato did, and Adeze found this pattern interesting enough to sit with for a few days. She had spent 3 years with a man who interrupted, who spoke over her and then summarized what he thought she had said, who asked questions but was already composing his answer while she gave hers. She had told herself that was just how he talked. Now she understood that it was how he listened, which is a different thing, and that what it meant was he was not actually listening at all. He was waiting. There is a gap between those two things. It takes some time to see it. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Kato listened. Ishida listened. Her mother listened. Precious listened, and then told you what she actually thought, which was sometimes the same thing and sometimes not, and which was valuable in its own way. Adeze was surrounded by people who could actually hear her, and she was only now beginning to understand how rare that was and what it was worth. The night before the meeting in April, she did not sleep well. She was not nervous exactly. She was alert. She lay in the dark and thought about David in that supermarket. "You got fat. Maybe eat a salad." She thought about what those words had done in the moment. The small contained flinch she had not let him see. The 3-block walk home. The decision not to cry about it, because he had lost the right to her tears some months prior. She was not interested in giving him anything he no longer had a claim to. She thought about what the words looked like now, from here, 8 months and 1 meeting room later. They looked small. They looked like what they were. A man who could only see surfaces because that was all he had ever been interested in. Saying a surface thing to a woman whose depth he had never found and never tried to. That was all. He had not been cruel so much as limited. She had been inside his limits for 3 years without knowing they were limits. She knew now. She got up at 5. She made tea, the specific kind, Kato's kind, which she had incorporated into her mornings somewhere along the way, without making a decision about it. She sat by the window and watched the city wake up and thought, you only get to see this because you left. You only get to be here because you walked out with 1 bag. You only get Amara because of a Tuesday night in February, when a doctor discovered he had somewhere to be. None of this was planned. All of it was yours. She got dressed. She found the charcoal dress. She put it on and looked in the mirror and thought, yes, that is right. She got Amara settled with the care arrangement. She met Ishida at 9. She went upstairs. She sat down at the table and looked across the room and saw David, and she thought, here it is. This is the correction, not punishment, not revenge. Just correction, the record made accurate. The picture made complete. When David crossed the room at the break and said Amara is 8 months old, she could see him recalibrating in real time. All the assumptions he had made. All the story he had told himself about how things had gone. The version in which she had struggled, in which the breakup had hit her hard, in which she had gained weight from stress eating and walked through a supermarket looking tired. The version in which he was still the one who was fine. She watched him update that version in front of her, and she felt nothing particularly dramatic about it, just the clean satisfaction of a record corrected. The thing brought back into accuracy, not for him, for the sake of things being true. I see, he said. Good, she said. And that was enough. That was the whole thing, because you do not need drama for the correction to happen. You just need to be there, in the room, with the actual facts of your life visible. The rest takes care of itself. The weeks after the meeting moved differently. She had not expected that. Her shifts were the same. His calls were the same. Amara's face was changing, the way babies' faces change constantly when they are small, offering you a new version of them every few days. But something had settled. Something had arrived at the place it was always going. She could feel it in the way she went to sleep at night, without the low hum of something unfinished running underneath everything. You might be wondering what happened to David after that. The answer is, not much. And that is exactly right. Some stories want a villain undone, and this one has that too. But the undoing was not dramatic. His company's relationship with the organization was renegotiated on terms that were less favorable to his side. He lost his consulting arrangement within 2 months. This was not because of a diazy. It was because of how the meeting had gone. And meetings go the way they go because of what is true about the parties involved. What was true about David was what had always been true. He was a man of limited vision who had mistaken his limitations for the edges of the world. When your worldview is that small, you make decisions that reflect it. His decisions had caught up with him. Not through any act of cruelty, just through consequence. Which is the kind of correction that sticks. She did not find out about this for several weeks, and when she did, she felt almost nothing, which surprised her. She had expected something, satisfaction or relief, or some version of the specific pleasure of watching a person who underestimated you face the cost of that. But what she felt instead was something more like the absence of weight, like setting down a bag you had been carrying without noticing. She had not been waiting for his correction. She had already moved past the point where his correction was something she needed. It had happened anyway. That was fine. She moved on. Ishida told Kato that she had asked about it, which she had not. She had mentioned it once, in passing. Kato called that evening. He asked carefully whether she was all right. She said yes, genuinely. He said good. They talked for another 40 minutes about other things entirely. Amara's new habit of grabbing at faces with both hands, the specific tea she had been drinking, a hospital policy change that was making her shifts more complicated. At the end of the call, he said, "You know you can ask me about anything." She said, "I know." He said, "Good." And that was enough. That was the whole of it. There is a version of this story where you expect her to have crumbled, where the ex who mocked her, the doctor who walked away, the nights alone in a shared house with $240 to her name, where all of that adds up to someone broken, someone waiting to be rescued, someone whose story is about what someone else did for her. That is not what you are watching. What you are watching is a woman who was always whole, who was always capable, who was always already the person she needed to be. What changed was not her. What changed was who was in the room with her, who was willing to see what was actually there, who had the patience to look at her the way you look at something you intend to understand, not to use, not to fix, not to assess and file away, but to actually know. You deserve someone who looks at you like that. You know you do. Most people know they do. The hard part is not knowing it. The hard part is believing, after enough people have looked at you the other way, that the other kind of looking is real and available and coming. The quick assessing look, the surface look, the look that clocks you and files you and moves on. That is what you have learned to expect. Something else is possible. Adeze had almost stopped believing that. She had not stopped entirely. That small remaining belief was the whole hinge of everything. Do not stop believing it. That is what this story is for, at the end of it. Not the wish fulfillment, though there is nothing wrong with wish fulfillment. There is a reason you are here watching this, and the reason is human and real. But underneath the wish fulfillment, the thing that actually matters, a reminder that people who are invisible are not actually invisible. They are being looked at by the wrong people. The right people exist. They are looking for you too. Sometimes they arrive bleeding in the middle of a Tuesday night, and you are the only one left in the room, and the whole rest of everything is still in front of you. Stay in the room. Do your work. That is all you need to do. Your staying is not small. Your work is not invisible. The right person will see, and when they do, you will look up and realize you have been building something extraordinary the whole time. You just did not have anyone looking who could see it yet. Now you do. Trust what you are building. Trust your staying. Trust that the work is enough. It always was. She thought sometimes about the version of herself who had stood at a nursing station and watched a doctor decide he had somewhere urgent to be. She had not been afraid. She had not been trying to be brave. She had simply looked at a patient and looked at the task in front of her and chosen. That was all. She had chosen. Every single thing that followed, Kato, Amara, the meeting room in April, the charcoal dress, the man who now looked at her like she was something he intended to keep, had followed from that one ordinary, unremarkable choice. You cannot know what your choosing will cost when you make it. You cannot know where it will take you. You can only look at what is in front of you and decide whether you are the person who stays or the person who finds somewhere urgent to be. Adaize had always stayed. She had stayed with David Past when she should have. She had stayed at that nursing station when Yamazaki left. She had stayed through 7 weeks of uncertainty before she picked up a phone and made a call she had no script for. Staying was not always right. But when it was everything. Amara was 1 year old in December. Kato brought a cake that was slightly too elaborate for a 1-year-old and entirely correct for the occasion. Precious came. A colleague from the night shift came. Ishida came and stood near the window, looking at the baby with an expression that was the most warmth Adaize had ever seen from him, and which she suspected would not be discussed. She watched Kato hold his daughter. Amara grabbed his thumb with both hands and examined it with the specific intensity infants reserve for things they find genuinely interesting. He looked down at her with the same focused stillness he brought to everything, like she was a fact he was committing to memory. She thought about who he had been the first night she met him, bleeding on a gurney in her emergency department, surrounded by men in suits, and who he was now, standing in her living room with cake frosting on his cuff and his daughter investigating his hand. She thought about herself, the woman who had left with 1 bag and $240 and told herself she was starting over. She thought about the specific distance between those 2 points and everything that had happened in it. The gap looked impossible from either end. From inside it, it had been made entirely of days. Ordinary days. Days that added up. Love was not the thing she had expected. It had not arrived in a dramatic moment or declared itself cleanly. It had arrived the way most real things arrive, gradually, through evidence, through small repeated acts of care that accumulated over time into something unmistakable. She had looked up one day and understood that she trusted this man with her life, and her daughter's life, and her mornings, which was the hardest thing of all. And the trust was not naive. It was not missing the complicated truth of who he was. She saw all of it. She chose anyway. Amara was laughing now. Kato had done something with his free hand. He was not a performer of emotions. He did not laugh often. But he was smiling. The real kind. The kind that shows up without permission. She watched them. The quiet ones, she thought. Everyone underestimates the quiet ones, what they are building, what they are waiting for, how precisely they know what they want. She had been quiet for a long time. She had worked her shifts and kept her head down and given herself to people who did not see her and told herself it was fine. And then, one February night, she had turned back to a patient because there was work to do. Everything since had followed from that one choice. The choice to stay. Some debts are not paid in cash. Some are paid in February mornings when you choose to stay, and in the years that follow from that choosing, and in the faces of small people who would not exist if you had not. Adaize had stayed. She had always stayed. It had taken her a long time to understand that her staying was not a weakness. It was the whole thing. It was everything she was. Never underestimate the quiet ones. They are not still because they have nothing to offer. They are still because they are choosing. Carefully, exactly right. And when they finally move, you understand that you were never watching nothing. You were watching patience. You were watching someone who already knew. You just did not know yet that you were watching the whole story begin. If you have been with this story all the way through, which moment hit you hardest? Drop it in the comments right now. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, share it with them. We will see you in the next one.